Ladies and gentlemen, the Executive Director of the Geopolitical Cartographer, Rishan De Silva.
And now I call upon Dr. Ganeshan Wignaraja, a board member of the Geopolitical Cartographer, to facilitate the discussion.
Thank you, Secretary General. That was a really inspirational speech. And I really liked the part that you said we must dream. And I think that was really wonderful. And also for reminding us of the role of the Commonwealth. I'd like to do this question and answer session in two bits, if I may. The first bit, I thought we might have a conversation about some of the themes that you raised in your speech, just so that our public and our audience will get a better sense of the guts of what you're trying to say. And then we'll open it out to the audience to be able to ask a few questions, but let you collectively take them so you can pick and choose a bit as you like, if that's all right with you. Let me just start with this big issue that the geopolitical cartographer is worrying about, is the intensification of great power rivalries. And my question is, how does being part of the Commonwealth help members, particularly a small country, deal with this geopolitical context?
Well, I think what we've seen is many of our small states, remember we have 33 small states, 25 of them are island states, Sri Lanka is one of them, feel that their voice is not easily heard. And in the arena where the elephants are fighting, those who are small tend to be crushed or go unseen. And what the Commonwealth has been able to do is to give our member states that voice. Many of our developing and smaller states have said on a number of occasions that in the global space, their economic position being weak, their numbers in terms of population being small, it's very difficult to be heard, but it's very difficult even to have a conversation with some of the larger countries and their leaders. And it's quite remarkable to sit round the Commonwealth table. You will have a country like India, representing 1.417 billion people, speaking face-to-face round the same table with the president of a country as small as Nauru, which has 10,000 people. And they each have the same vote. So what that means is they get to listen to each other. And that's, I think, the reason why we've been able to craft some solutions which other entities have failed to do, is because everyone is around that table. The big ones, the small ones, the squeezed ones in the middle, the developing countries, the developed countries, the rich, the poor, the black, the white. Every religion, every race is represented. And I think that's the nature of the Commonwealth, which is absolutely unique. And they listen to each other. They actually listen to each other.
Thank you. Let me shift gear a little bit. You talked about the Polycrisis somewhat in socio-economic terms, and it's certainly been terrible on the people of the Commonwealth. But I wonder, how important is governance and peace in addressing the Polycrisis in Commonwealth countries?
I think it's of critical importance because most of our member states, as rich as they may be, do not have enough money to deliver everything they need to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. That's just the reality of where we are. It boils down to good governance. If you govern well, if you use your assets well, your opportunity to deliver more is enhanced. And that's why we spent almost 2 years working on the generally accepted performance management principles for government. And that's why I said it sounds boring, but it's actually absolutely critical. because it's very difficult to get an objective assessment as to whether a country is doing good, bad, or indifferent, because quite often this judgment is made in the eye of the beholder. If I like you, I tell you you're doing well. If I don't like you, I might tell you you're doing badly. But where is the empirical data to demonstrate whether my assessment is right or wrong? So what we did, and it took us about 2 years, working with all of the Commonwealth senior officials. We had cabinet secretaries, directors in charge of performance management. We had permanent secretaries. And we wanted to define, what does good governance look like? What are the standards? How are we going to judge it? And we created a performance management system which is accepted by all of our members to be a fair method to assess good governance. And that was agreed. We had a meeting where all the cabinet secretaries and delegated permsecs came. We agreed the performance management, and in June of last year, these standards, which will be the basis upon which we can help each other to do better, to assess accurately what we're doing, was accepted. And we are now going to take those generally accepted performance management principles, which is called the GAP, and we're going to share those with the UN. And I hope, just as with climate change and with loss and damage and the other things, we, having done the back-breaking work of coming together and building this system, I hope it will be accepted by the UN, and that will be a means through which we can more effectively, more dynamically deliver what works on the sustainable development goals, so that we will leave no one behind, and we will have a fair, open, transparent system to really know whether our governments are doing what they promised and said on the tin. And some people think that's revolution.
In your speech, you talked a lot about climate, and I noticed you were talking about an environment ministers meeting and a climate finance advisor, if I got that right,
yes,
for Sri Lanka. How would you assess how well the Commonwealth has done in climate? Is it a new area? Do you have plans for expansion?
In fact, this is an area which the Commonwealth has been committed to since 1989. The first Commonwealth declaration on climate was in Lanka. And that declaration makes extraordinarily sober reading. It says that if we do not address the issue of climate change, it will pose an existential threat to our world. And it then went out and enumerated the ways in which that would happen. And in effect, the first IPCC report was the report which was given to the Commonwealth. And the COP, the first COP, did not take place till 3 years after ours. And the Commonwealth has continued to fight hard on climate change since 1989. And the real reason is because those countries who are most adversely affected by climate change, who face this threat on a daily basis, are in our Commonwealth. If I just give you the example of my own country of birth, in 2015, we were faced with a tropical storm Erica. Wasn't even supposed to be a hurricane. We have 365 rivers in Dominica. Every single river broke its bank. And there was flooding and devastation and destruction of 95% of Dominica's GDP. 2 years later, we were hit by the biggest hurricane the world had at that stage ever seen, Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria destroyed 226% of Dominica's GDP. 20% of the population had to leave the island. And if you went to my country, which is supposed to be green and called the Garden of Eden of the Caribbean, there wasn't even bark on the trees. It was brown, stripped bare, and there was a fear we would never recover. So climate change hit Sri Lanka. We saw the devastation of the tsunami, but we've seen flooding across Africa, across Asia. This reality means that it is an omnipresent threat for the majority of our countries. And that's why if you look at COP26, COP27, the countries who are really raising their voices on the environment were primarily countries from our Commonwealth family. And our solidarity on climate has been remarkable, but today it's needed more than ever.
Thank you very much. I will now open the floor for questions, and may I recognize Niranjan De Silva Diva-Aditya to ask the first question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations on having this very well-informed grouping together. Secretary General, you made a very moving speech. Actually, very moving speech indeed. Now, as you know, I have been in the European Union for 20 years, the European Parliament, and I saw member states, 27 member states, coming into ever closer union. 20 years ago, when I joined the EU Parliament, we were not as close as we are now, and subsequently, 7 treaties later, we have got many things in common and created, out of a desperate 24 different countries with different languages and systems, what is now called the EU, which is at the moment the 3rd largest economy in the world. As you know, it's got an attributes that I wanted. It's got a parliament, it's got a bank, it's got foreign services, it's got a currency, it's got everything. That is basically a member state. Now, our charter, which is about 74 years old, I suppose, is a static piece of paper in the sense that it is not dynamic in the sense of the European Union treaties. So a group of friends of yours have got together, as you know.
Sorry, may I trouble you, please, to ask the question,
yes.
sir, if you don't mind.
A group of friends of yours have got together and created what is called the Commonwealth Union to bring ever closer union of the Commonwealth countries in the same way that the EU countries came together. That is in order to support all the work you're doing. So how do we cooperate to make this happen faster?
Well, the first
Madam,
thing...
shall I ask a couple more around, and then we can give you a chance to answer? Are there any other questions? This is the last chance you'll have, because we'll have to close the session soon. If there are any other questions, please. Sorry, please. Could you just tell us who you are, and then just wait for a mic, please. Just one sec, sir. Just 1 second. Thank you.
My name is Ravana Vijayaratna, and my question goes back to the very question you asked, which is an important question, I believe. You mentioned them, the 2 elephants. Let's talk very openly. China and America and a lot of the countries in the Commonwealth are at a huge dilemma as to which way they go, and if they stay neutral, they're not even perceived as neutral. What can the Commonwealth do as a whole and under your leadership to guide them in a way that they can be neutral and still be safe?
Are there any last questions that anyone would like to ask the Secretary General? Well, let me then add one last question of my own. So you talked a lot about the Commonwealth being a partnership and something very different to what it had originally been founded upon. The question being asked sometimes in Sri Lanka and in other states is the Commonwealth still relevant in the reign of King Charles III? His mother, of course, was a different personality and gave a lot of breadth, and we would all love to hear your views. Thank you so much.
Well, the first thing to say, and maybe I'll take them in reverse order. to say I think the Commonwealth has never been more relevant than it is today. If it didn't exist, I think we'd have great difficulty in creating it, because it's created in history a situation where it doesn't matter whether you're big or you're small, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, which geographical region you come from, you are bound by the same values, and those values have created economic worth and real resilience. I think if you look at the aspirations that the leaders had in 1945 and then went on after the Second World War to create the Commonwealth, the new Commonwealth in 1949, the aspirations for our Commonwealth are actually the same. It's how we have to migrate the solutions for the new 21st century that are different. We still want fairness. We still want justice. We still want good governance. We still want equity. All of those things are now taking place in a different paradigm. So what we're doing now is responding to the new pressures as opposed to changing the aspirations we had at the beginning. And the truth is that it is, of course, right that the new reign has started. But let's see what the leaders did when they decided to elect, in effect, King Charles as the next head of the Commonwealth. It was based on not the fact that he was the heir to the throne, but on the basis of what he'd done for the last 50 years. So many people forget that he was the original climate change champion. Do you remember how people used to laugh about him talking to his plants? And the fact that he concentrated on dysfunctional young men with his work on the Prince's Trust. The fact that he wanted to promote sustainable development. All those issues were quintessentially Commonwealth issues. And so I think we have a new head of the Commonwealth who has probably had the longest apprenticeship known to man. And he's honed the skill and understanding. I think he's probably been to almost every country in our Commonwealth. He has grown up with many of our leaders. We've been blessed with the fact that the current president of Sri Lanka, I think, has been Prime Minister 6 times. So is well known by everybody. And so these realities, I think, mean that we have stability, continuity, and a stronger platform than we would have perhaps if we had someone else. So I think the short answer, which is a long answer I've just given, is that we've never been more relevant. In terms of the elephants warring, this is another area which is so important for the function of our Commonwealth. We have disparate views. We've always had disparate views. The fact that we have one table around which we can discuss those disparate views means that we have always been able to come out with a consensus. And if you look at the Commonwealth communique in Kigali, there was clearly a very robust discussion, but in the end, there was consensus. And one of the reasons that so many countries are coming to our Commonwealth is that we are generally seen, if I can put it colloquially, as sane in an insane world. We are able to listen to each other, to understand the problems, and create the space that enables us to find peace and peaceful resolution of some of the very difficult problems. So these issues aren't easy. If they were easy, everybody would solve them quickly. But they're complex, and they're difficult, and they need discussion, they need comity, and they need debate. As to ever closer union, I think we are already extremely close. If you think about what we have in the Commonwealth, we are not bound by treaty. We're not a treaty-based organization. We're bound by values. We're bound by principles. We're bound by common purpose and common institutions. We have the common law. We have the common approach to government. We have a common language. We have common institutions. All of those give us our advantage. In the European Union, one of the difficulties was that we had 28 countries with 24 different legal systems. There were so many difficulties trying to harmonize all those systems. We already have a harmonized legal system in our Commonwealth. We already have harmonized institutions, harmonized education, harmonized standards, and all that harmony gives us an ability to trade. We have more than 3 trillion trade within the Commonwealth, but the intra-Commonwealth trade is very interesting because we've never really exploited our intra-Commonwealth trade. And in 2015, when the Commonwealth, which is before I became Secretary General, did an analysis, they found that we had a 19% advantage. We called it the advantage when I came, but that advantage has now risen to 21%. What if by working together and having mirrored procedures, taking advantage of our common law principles, what if we can drive that up to 30%? So it's 30% cheaper, easier, faster to trade with each other than to trade with those outside our family. That's going to drive our economy. We're currently at $768 billion of intra-Commonwealth trade. By 2026, we hope to be at $1 trillion of intra-Commonwealth trade. By 2030, we hope to be at 2 trillion. But think about what we have as an advantage. 21% of our member states are in Africa. Africa is going to be the source of the minerals of the fourth industrial revolution. Africa has just agreed the African Continental Free Trade Area. If the principles and modalities of that Continental Free Trade Area are going to be based on common law principles and on a level of interoperability, then it is likely that that 2 trillion could be even greater. We have the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. Because of the similarities between our legal systems, we can use mirrored procedures to develop that trade. Ngozi and I have just signed a memorandum of understanding. We are going to look at using our Commonwealth as the platform to explore what we can do to enhance the opportunities for trade and using those mirrored procedures. So I want all the help we can get from our lawyers, from our scientists to come together, and that's why I think we can do this. Digitalization is going to be our future, and we are going to have to train our children, not for by using an educational system fit for the 19th century, because if we do that, our children won't be able to meet the needs of the 21st century. So these are opportunities and challenge, and these are pressures. And that's why I say, remember, we are carbon. Our bodies, we are carbon. You put carbon under extreme pressure, and you create diamonds. So that's what we have to do. We have to take this difficult, stressful, complex polycrisis, and we have to turn it into diamonds. That's what our countries have done before, that's what our grandparents did, and that's what we must now do, this generation. This is our challenge.
Thank you, Secretary General, for first speaking from the heart and giving us some hope and encouraging us to dream and think outside the box. Let me hand over to Rishan. Thank you.
Thank you both.